Today's episode is brought to you by Jimmy Bean's Wool. Started in 2002, Jimmy Bean's Wool has been your go-to local yarn shop online for nearly 2 decades. They've got thousands of yarns to choose from in a variety of brands, weights, colors, and price points, along with everything you need to create and finish the perfect project. They're now offering free U.S. shipping to all Craft Industry Alliance podcast listeners. Head to jimmybeanswool.com/Craft Industry Alliance to get crafting. Thank you so much, Jimmy Bean's Wool. And now, here's the show. Welcome to episode 180 of the Craft Industry Alliance podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Craft Industry Alliance is a community for craft professionals where you can strengthen your creative business, stay up to date on industry news, and build connections within our supportive trade association. Check it out at craftindustrｙalliance.org. Today on the show, we're talking about building a knitting business with my guest, Louis Boria. After going viral for knitting during his daily subway commute from Brooklyn to Manhattan in late 2017, 45-year-old Puerto Rican knitwear designer and philanthropist Louis Boria, also known as Brooklyn Boy Knits, has turned his passion for fiber arts into a platform where he now works with the community. He uses his platform to break down gender norms and tackle issues related to diversity and inclusion within the fiber arts community. Throughout his journey from novice knitter to designer to TEDx speaker and influencer, he's focused on helping others. He believes that creativity can help heal wounds, both our own and society's. Boria has collaborated with fiber artists, fiber industry leaders, community partners, and school districts to provide an interactive, engaging, and fun program that teaches young students to value differences. Be sure to check out Louis's TEDx talk, Making the Most of Your Moment, which can be found on YouTube. Louis Boria, welcome.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for coming. I'm really excited to talk to you and talk all about your journey. It's so cool. So let's start from the beginning. I know that you are Puerto Rican. Where did you grow up? Did you grow up in New York?
I did. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. When I was a little bit younger, I would say around 7 years old, my parents moved out to Pennsylvania for a little bit of time, and then I came right back to Brooklyn, and I lived with my grandmother for some time. And I've never left. It's always been, I call Brooklyn, my heart and soul. I just love living in New York and everything about being a Brooklynite, as they say.
And what did your parents do for work when you were growing up? What were they doing? So
my stepfather, he works for one of the biggest candy factories in America, which is Just Born Candy. They actually are the masterminds behind Peeps. I don't know if you guys are familiar with.
Of course.
So he's been working with the company for well over 30 years now, and my mother has always been in the healthcare industry, working in hospital administration, and so pretty much we all kind of followed route in terms of what we were going to do for work, and we all pretty much work in the hospital. My brother, my sister, myself, we've all worked in some form of the medical field. So,
and that's what you do now too, right? Like you work at a hospital. What is do you still have a day job, correct?
I do. I've been working at Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan for the past 12 years as an executive assistant. I love my job. And it's great because it keeps me on my toes. I manage payroll, so I'm in charge of making sure that everybody gets paid in my department. So it's a pretty important job, I would say. It could be challenging sometimes, but I try to do my best.
Do you feel like having a stable income and benefits and things like that has sort of helped you not put so much pressure on the knitting side of your life? Or are you aiming at some point to make your knitting business your full-time gig?
Well, my knitting has been able to help supplement a lot of the fun stuff in my life, right? So like, I do get paid well, with from the hospital, but the knitting is what drives me, right? So like the money that I make from my business, whether I'm pattern writing or whether I'm selling pieces or collaborations, whatever that may look like at the time, that helps me travel. That helps me get the things that I'm like, oh, I don't have to worry about, going out to a nice restaurant and being able to sit down with friends and have a good meal without having to worry about, well, is this going to break the bank? Because at the end of the day, like, knitting, you could be in a good place in this industry, with the right connections, I would say, or maybe with the right collaborations. But it's a tough industry to really like say, well, can I give up my day job?
Yeah, it's tough.
Right. And I can't say that. Like, I'll be honest with you. Like, I want to get to that place, and I feel like I'm starting to move my way there. But I'm very honest in when I talk to people, and they're like, oh, well, where do you see yourself 10 years from now? And that's a good question. And as much as I would love to answer that question, you just never know, right?
Right. Absolutely.
You just never know.
Yeah. And so I want to talk a little bit about sort of the trajectory that you've been on. So how did you learn how to knit? It sounds like maybe one of was it your grandmother? Did she introduce you to knitting, or was it somebody else?
Oh, my grandmother introduced me to the fiber arts. She crochets, right? So when I was and I tell the story, I think I must have been like 14 years old, and I had spent the summer with her, and it was just her and I, and I was working at a day camp during the day in the summer, and there was just weekends would come, and I'd spend my whole time with my grandmother, and she's like, all right, I'm going to teach you how to crochet. And just to entertain the thought, I was like, fine, why not? And I did. And it was just one of those things where it's like, you learn a new trick, and then it's like, okay, done. It's back in my pocket, and I walk away from it. And that's how I was with crochet. She taught me one time. And till this day, I could pick up, a hook, and I know how to chain, and I know how to do single and double crochet, but that's as far as it goes with crochet. So I never looked back at it. So at 14 years old, I was like, I picked it up. I learned real quick. Just to appease my grandmother, and it was fun. But as quickly as I picked up that hook was as quickly as I put it back down. And it wasn't until my early 30s when I talk about this all the time, where I woke up one morning from a dream I had of me knitting, literally knitting. And you wake up from those dreams sometimes where it's like, did that just happen? Like it felt so real. And I felt like this connection to knitting that I had never felt before. It's not like I wanted to learn how to knit at the time. It's not like I saw somebody knitting or, I had an interest in it. It was nothing like that. It was just this random dream that I had of me knitting. And all I saw was my hands working with the yarn and the knitting needles. And I literally woke up feeling like I know how to knit. Like it was weird. It was just like, man, maybe if I tried learning, maybe I'd be good at it. And long story short, I went to Michael's, I picked up yarn and knitting needles, and I literally sat in front of a computer and I hopped onto YouTube, and I started the journey of learning how to knit through YouTube videos.
And had you seen like hand knitting? Like, I mean, had you maybe been somewhere where somebody was knitting, or, admired some knitting that you'd seen somewhere and been like, oh, that's so pretty, or I don't know, seen it somewhere before then?
Well, my best friend, she dabbled and dabbled into knitting. And it was just one of those things like, oh, that's pretty. But it wasn't a thing where I was like, oh, I want to learn how to knit. You see what I'm saying?
It just was sort of, but it was like around you a little bit at least.
Right. Nothing. It wasn't something that sparked my curiosity. In other words,
right.
It was the dream that sparked my curiosity.
So interesting. It's like entered your subconscious.
It really did, and I instantly felt the minute I turned on my first, and I had no idea what I was looking at. Even I still remember walking into Michael's and having no clue what I was buying. There's so much yarn. There's so many different size needles. I'm like, well, I'm just going to grab whatever looks nice. And I picked, I think it was like a size 11 needle because it was like blue or green, and I was like, oh, these are a nice color. I'm just gonna grab these. Without even looking at the size, had no idea what
Well,
I was
because you
doing.
wouldn't even know like what the
Right.
different numbers meant or anything. Yeah. Yeah.
So it was like, I was like, oh, I'll just pick my favorite color. And that's what I thought it was about. I was like, well, pick your favorite color. But I had no idea that there were all these different sizes and the colors corresponded to the size of the needle. So I had no idea what I was doing, obviously. So I laugh about that now. And now it's like, oh, you don't mess with my needles. Like I have I have like,
Oh, yeah. Because they're your Pro Tools, right? Right.
Right. So, but yeah, it was just like the minute I hopped onto that first video and I cast it on, I was hooked. I was like, that's it. Like I started knitting, and like I literally picked it up within minutes. It wasn't like I was a really fast learner. I'm a very visual learner, and that's just the way I work. My brain works that way. If I see somebody do it once, I'll get it. And so watching these videos, like I just literally went down a rabbit hole, and it was like I was discovering this world that I had no idea existed. And it was such a beautiful, journey from the beginning. And I love every part of my journey. And I always tell, young students of mine and those students that are picking up knitting for the very first time, I tell them, enjoy the process. Like, don't be in such a rush to make a sweater or, make a hat. Like, learn the basics. That's the beauty of the fiber arts is getting from one level to the next. And I, even myself as a designer now, I'm still learning. I'm still evolving. I'm still processing.
Oh, that's the thing with knitting is like it's a lifelong process. You can learn forever. Yeah.
Right. And so, it's just it's the one thing in my life that I can say is mine. Right. We all have that thing in life where we like to call our own. Our work, hopefully for many of us, we can say that our work is our life, right? But that we enjoy it. Not that we're making it our life, but that we enjoy what we're doing so much to the point that you can say, oh, this is mine. But for so many people out there in the world, it's a craft, it's a hobby, it's a sport. It could be reading, it could be anything like that. That says, this is my thing. That when you pick it up or when you pick up that book and you start to read that book, that you're like, you're in your zen, you're in your moment, and nothing in the world can take you away from that. And that's when you find that thing in your life that you say, this is it.
Right.
And I always say, well, what if you could just take that one thing in your life that you love so much, that you're so passionate, that brings you joy, that brings you happiness, and turn it into a career, or turn it into something that's tangible in terms of monetary substance, right? What if we could do that? And people's eyes light up like, yeah, that's the ultimate goal. And I always tell people that it's possible. Don't ever second guess, your ability to turn your passion into a business. And I was able to do that. I was able to find an outlet where I was able to do that and connect everything that I love about knitting, whether it's working with the community, whether it's working in schools, my website, I got different collaborations happening, and I love it all. And, one of the biggest questions that people ask me is like, does it ever feel like work? And I'm like, what do you mean, does it feel like work? I'm like, knitting has never felt like that for me. And if ever your passion ever feels like, oh, I got to get up and I have to do that, then you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I totally hear you on that. You're doing the right thing when it doesn't feel like work. You would pay them to be able to do it. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's 100% true. Yeah.
I think it's really important that, you never turn your passion into this thing where it's like, oh, I got to get up and
drudgery.
I have to do this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Totally. And so you went to Michael's and you bought these rando materials like most beginners do, and you learned on YouTube. And I have a few questions there. So one is, did you have a sense when you first began that it was fairly unusual for men to knit, or at least in modern times. I don't think it was actually unusual always for men to knit, but at least now it is. Or did you have any feeling like about knitting, you know, in public when you were first beginning that people might like look askance or something?
I did. I mean, I remember even that first visit to Michael's, and I've been to Michael's before, but now I'm entering Michael's in a, you know, through a whole different vision now. Now I'm in the yarn aisle, right? And you know, I've never went down the yarn aisle before, before the dream that I had. And here I am. I'm standing in the aisle, and I'm surrounded by women, right? There's women around me, and you know, so I realized that there weren't people like me. You know what I mean? A guy, you know, a Hispanic guy in a yarn aisle at Michael's, looking at yarn and knitting needles, and it was just kind of this odd moment for me where it was just like, all right, let me just get my yarn and get out of here. It's just like, not that I sort of was like a little bit like, you know, I didn't want to get questioned, you know, like, well, what are you doing here? Or people just look at me like, why is this guy standing next to yarn when, you know, this is traditionally done by women and done by, you know, the way the world perceives it, right, is older women. Unfortunately, that's how we see it, right? Depicted in cartoons or depicted in comic strips or whatever. Like you always see the little old lady on a rocking chair knitting away. And that was my perception, only because, you know, I was seeing it through the eyes of what the world was seeing, right, in a whole. And we all know, crocheters and knitters out there all know that that's not the case, especially nowadays. You don't see that. That is not the only perception that we're seeing once you've entered the fiber arts world. So, you know, yeah, I did have reservations. I felt a little ashamed. I'm not going to lie. Like, it was just like, well, there's nobody like me, you know. So going on a train and having a project in my bag, I was not pulling that project out in the beginning. I was just like, the only time I'm doing it is when I'm at home in my apartment, no one's around me, or during lunch at my job when I can sit in the conference room knowing that nobody else is entering the conference room during my lunch hour. So it was always done in private, and so I never looked at it at that time as me hiding, but I truly was hiding from the world and hiding my knitting. As much as I loved it so much, and as much as I had this newfound passion for it, there was still a bigger part of me at the time that was ashamed and associated knitting with a female-dominated craft.
Yeah.
And I mean, and in essence, it really is a more female-dominated craft, right? When we look at the numbers and we look at the scope of, you know, the fiber arts world, it's pretty much dominated by women. Yes.
Yeah, it still is. Yeah.
But, right. So I knew that, and, you know, growing up, you know, in Latino culture, it's very black and white. And what I mean by that is that, you know, the men in most Latin culture is like, well, you're supposed to be, you know, play sports, and you can't do this. If you pick up a craft, and, you know, they're gonna make fun of you, right? And they're gonna call you girly boy or whatever the case is. And so it's growing up and seeing that, and seeing how other boys around my age at the time growing up would be made fun of for taking dance classes or for joining the drama team. It was like, oh, you're that way. And it's kind of like, what do you mean that way? And I had to deal with that growing up. Like, I was into, you know, I sang in the high school choir. I participated in drama club. I did all that. And even growing up, I was made fun of. So now as an adult, I find this new craft that I fell in love with. And now it's like, oh my God, I'm back. I feel like I'm back in high school again.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm back in high school.
Yeah.
Putting myself in this little box again. And
it's scary. Yeah, it's scary. There's shame. There's shame, and shame's a really powerful feeling. Yeah,
it really is. And I can tell you, Abby, like, I didn't like it as an adult. I thought I was over that. I really did. Thought I was over it. I thought I had, overcome that part of my life. And here I am with a new craft in my hands that I love so much. And I'm putting myself back in that box again. And it wasn't until, a year later where I'm literally sitting on the train and the train comes to a halt and we're like stuck now. And I'm just there. I'm like, all right, what am I doing? Nothing. People are looking down on their phones. People are reading a book. Here I am with a project in my bag. And I'm like, that's it. I'm taking it out. And I'm like sweating bullets. I'm like literally not in my stomach because I'm afraid that they're going to start looking at me, making fun of me. And I tell the story that the minute when I took that project out of my bag and I started knitting, like I completely forgot about my surroundings. As you all know, knitting, it centers you, and it's your form of therapy. That anything that's happening is just like you could have the worst day possible, and the minute that you start knitting is like, oh, it's gone.
Right.
Like you don't, right? And so that's what was happening that moment on the train that I started knitting. And yes, I was very nervous and my knots in my stomach and I'm sweating and I'm like thinking the worst. And the minute I just started doing a couple rows, like that, it just started like leveling me out. And then I realized, oh, I'm knitting. And then I look up and people were looking at me, but they weren't looking at me the way I thought they were looking at me. It was like, oh, wow, this is nice. Like people smiling at me. And then I had, a woman come up to me. She's like, oh my God, what are you making? It's so pretty. And I'm like, thank you. And it started this conversation, and that was it. That was it. It's like I broke the chains at that day. I broke the chains, and it was like my world just completely changed right after that.
Yeah.
And that's where I transitioned from, having a craft to having a passion.
Right.
My passion just exploded after that. And it was just like, I felt a sense of freedom, and I was like, oh, now I can knit anywhere. I don't care who's watching me. Like,
right.
It was just like, it felt so good. And
knitting became part of your identity because you could do it in public and sort of admit that it was part of you. I want to take a minute now to talk about our sponsor, Jimmy Bean's Wool. Jimmy Bean's has been around for just shy of 2 decades. It started as a small local yarn shop in the tiny town of Truckee, California, and it's still family owned and operated by Laura and Doug Zander. Today, Jimmy Bean's is a 20,000 square foot warehouse and a retail space in Reno, Nevada. Della Q, Madeline Tosh, and Smart Sticks all joined the Jimmy Bean's family of brands within the last 2 years. Della Q has some neat things coming up. They are launching a line of maker-specific handbags this fall. Each one comes with a built-in yarn feeder, yarn cutter, and spare stitch markers. They're made of sturdy wax canvas and come in a collection of timeless colors. For Madeline Tosh, they recently announced a new collection with Josh Bennett, featuring 2 sweaters, a hoodie, and the coziest of blanket patterns. Seasonal holiday advent calendars for knitters and crocheters are also available now at Jimmy Bean's. Cast on is December 1st, and craft vent calendars come with all the yarn, needles, or hooks, notions, and treats that you will need to complete a stunning shawl by Amy Gunderson if you're knitting, or Coco Crochet Lee if you're crocheting. Jimmy Bean's 2021 clubs include a blanket, shawl, and accessory club, are going to be announced this month, which is November 2020. You get free shipping in the US. They carry basically a huge selection of indie and hand-dyed and big brand yarns, needles, and hooks in all sizes, notions, accessories, and more. So head over to jimmybeanswool.com for all things knitting and crocheting, and definitely sign up for the Jimmy Bean's Wool newsletter to keep up with everything that they have going on. Jimmy Bean's Wool is your local yarn shop online. Thank you so much, Jimmy Bean's. And now back to my conversation with Louis. I'm assuming then you needed more yarn. And so did you go into a local yarn shop? Did you discover local yarn shops at some point in this period? Okay.
Right. So it wasn't until I would say like about a year and a half after my first trip to Michael's that I found this knitting shop called Knit Away in Brooklyn, And I just happened one day to be walking down Atlantic Avenue, which is a really busy shopping area in Brooklyn. And I said, oh, it's a yarn shop? I'm like, whoa. And like, so it never dawned on me. Like the only yarn shops I used to think of was like Michael's or Joann's or AC Moore, like these bigger chain
yeah, and I think
right?
it's most beginners, that's where they go. And I think it's always really important for those of us who are in the craft to always remind ourselves and realize that that's where beginners start, and that those shops play a really important role in the journey of somebody who then gets sucked in and becomes an official, like a person who's a huge, hobbyist and does patronize local shops and pattern designers and get sucked into the world. But they start where you started.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with
no
buying yarn from these, and I still do. Like, for instance, we talk a lot about, yarn shaming, right? And it's a topic that a lot of people don't like talking about when it comes to yarn.
Can you explain what yarn shaming is for people who haven't heard about it?
So yarn shaming is, we have, in our industry, we have different price points when it comes to yarn, right? So our acrylic bases, yarn, basically the yarn that you would find at Michael's or Joann's or your local AC Moore or Hobby Lobby, like those types of chains, craft store chains, focus mostly on acrylic base yarns, right? So they're on the lower end, right? And then you have your local yarn shops. Now, the local yarn shops are going to carry your more high-end yarns, such as wool and different bases like alpaca, cotton, silk, cashmere. And you're talking about going from a skein of yarn that you could buy at a Michael's for, like, let's say, average around $5, to an average skein of yarn at a local yarn shop at around $30. Now, there's nothing wrong with either or, based on what you want to do, right? And I, till this day, still use acrylic-based yarns for projects like for baby sweaters or baby blankets, because baby skin tends to be sensitive, and you can't really use wool on a baby skin because it could be a little scratchy on their skin, right? And some babies may be allergic to natural fibers. What we're seeing a lot is nowadays is like there are many people that find that these higher end yarn are more expensive, and they don't understand why they're more expensive. And I want to talk a little bit about that for a second. There's been an argument as to, well, why is indie dyed yarn so expensive, and why does it have to be so expensive? And even myself, I'm not going to lie, like when I first started and I first discovered what indie dyed yarn was, I was like, I'm not paying $35 for a skein of yarn. That's too much money, right? This was my mindset back then. This is like year 2 into knitting. And it wasn't until a woman broke it down to me and explained to me why it's why the price point is a little bit higher than a skein of yarn from Michael's. And when she told me about the process of what an indie dyer goes through to make that one skein of yarn, I was breaking a sweat just thinking about it. I was like, wow. I was like, and so that you have this newfound respect for why, the price point is what it is for indie dyed yarn. And I have no problem spending $35 on a skein of yarn, because I know the amount of work that went into dyeing that one skein of yarn. I know what it takes, because I started dipping and dabbing into dyeing yarn myself. And I said, you know what, let me try this out myself and let me see what this is all about, right? And when I realized the process that I went through to make 3 skeins of yarn, it took me a couple of hours, not 20 minutes. And that's what, like, from the process of, putting in, measuring your water and adding citric acid, and then measuring out the dye and soaking the yarn, and then taking it out and then washing and then drying it. And then It was just, 2 hours is an I'm underestimating it. It's more than that.
Plus creating these like unique recipes. It's an art form. Yeah. And people don't quite realize that when they first begin. Of course they wouldn't, right? And so if you're knitting something too that's going to take hundreds of hours, right? Then you should use materials that are truly special, because think of the time investment that you're putting into it.
Right. Exactly. And I see both sides, and I do understand that,
of course,
there are great alternatives out there. There are great alternatives, and it doesn't necessarily mean that, you have to buy that $30 skein of yarn. There are great options out there for you to choose from. You don't want to work with acrylic, but you don't want to spend that much money on a skein of yarn, then let's find a medium.
There's entry points for everybody, basically, is I think what you're saying. Yeah.
Yes. And what I love about this industry is that we have so many great yarn companies and indie dyers out there with great price points that I find that there's a place for everyone in this industry.
Absolutely. Right? And we should be welcoming to anybody who wants to get started or wants to make something. Because it's, as you said, like that feeling that you had when you were on the subway is a feeling that we should want everybody to have, because it's such a good feeling. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
And having that yarn on your side. And I have in my stash, I have a bunch of Lion Brand super chunky yarn. I use it all. I'm a fan of it. Like, and I'll never get rid of my acrylic yarn. You know what I mean? Like that's there, and I use it still. Like I said, there are certain projects that I'll only use acrylic yarn for. But and so whenever somebody says, "Oh, I would never touch acrylic yarn," I stop them in their tracks. I'm like, "You need to not say that." And I'm like, "There's nothing wrong with acrylic yarn." And I have stopped people in mid-sentence. I'm like, whoa, what did you just say? And I was like, oh, no. Well, no, you can't say that. I said, I happen to love acrylic yarn. So when it comes to, when I say yarn shaming, it's that.
Yeah.
Or statements from people that like, oh, I would never use acrylic yarn.
Well, thank you for explaining that, because I think it's helpful for people to sort of understand it. And I actually think it takes place not just in knitting, but in all different crafts once you sort of really delve into it and get into that sort of super user level. That definitely happens.
Yeah. And I just want to put it out now to anybody that works with acrylic yarns. Don't ever let anybody downplay you on that. Don't ever let anyone talk to you like that. If they say, "Oh, I would never work with that," I'm like, "Why are you working with that yarn?" Don't ever let them say anything. It's not right. And I stand by acrylic yarn. I'm a fan of it. It was my first love.
100%. So I want to get to this point in your story, because it's a really important point. So you took out your yarn, you were knitting on the subway, and you had this long commute, which I'm guessing you probably still have, from your day job back home to Brooklyn, and so you would knit on the subway. And this one day, somebody took a photo of you doing that and posted it on the internet. And I think from that moment on, we could probably all say for certain that your life really changed forever. And it's so interesting, because it's something that probably could happen to anyone. But it happened to you. And, it's like, what do you do when something like this happens to you, and how does it feel? And I'd love to hear from you. First, tell us the story of what happened, and then kind of what happened next, I guess.
Sure. The turning point was, it was in 2017, November 2017. I had just left the gym. It's like, I want to say like 6:30 in the evening. I get on the train. And at this point in my life, I'm as comfortable as they come with my knitting. So the first thing I ever do when I get on the train, any train, is I look for the first available seat. I sit down, I open my bag, and I pull out my project. And that's it. That's just every single day.
And how many years had you been knitting on the train at that point?
Oh, God. So I started, we're talking about maybe a good 8 years.
Okay. So a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's 8 years into it. or 8 or 9 years. And then, so I get on the train this one evening and I'm in sweats. I'm with my duffel bag, my gym bags with me. I got a baseball cap on. You look at me at that time and the picture, you could see me in the picture. It's still on the internet. It's me in sweats, and I don't look like a typical knitter. I have a baseball cap. I got a full beard. I have like sweats on. I got an army fatigue jacket on. And it's funny because I don't think about these things, right? I don't think about who's looking at me. I don't think about who's sitting in front of me watching me knit. I just do it now. So anyways, I sit down, I pull out my bag, my project out of my bag, and I start knitting. And the next morning, I go home, I shower, I eat dinner, and go to bed. Next morning, I wake up, and my phone is just like going off. I'm like, what the heck is going on? It just stops. It's like going on. I'm getting all these notifications, and I look, and my Instagram is like crazy. I mean, I went from like, I forget, it was like, I went from like a couple hundred, literally, like I must have had like 400 to 500 followers at the time, had jumped to like 4,000 followers overnight. And I'm like, what? This is insane. And then I go, my friend sends me a text message and he's like, oh my God, dude, you're all over Facebook. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, you're like all over the internet right now. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, there was a photo of you sitting on the train, and he sends me the picture, and he sends me a screenshot of the Facebook post that Frenchie Davis had taken. And it was the photo of me knitting. I was like, dude, that was me last night on the train. I was like, who is this? And then when I realized who it was, I started screaming. I was like, she was sitting in front of me? And I had no idea. And so it was that photo that she posted on social media that went viral. And it was just the image. I think it was more of the image of me as a man and dressed in sweats, not looking like a typical knitter, not caring in the world who was looking at it. And the facial expression I had in the picture was exactly that. And the caption read, "This brother on the train is my hero of the day."
And she was from American Idol, and she just took that photo and just just like posted it to her feed, and it just like transformed your whole career. It's just like really in like a minute.
Exactly. And from there, it was like I just started getting like calls from like the media and from the New York Daily News, and they wanted to interview me. And that's the New York Daily News article was what ignited, as I say, my career. And they came over my home, and we set up a date, and it was my first real interview. And for 2 hours, I sat with the reporter in my living room, and I just poured out my heart and told her my story and told her, what it meant to me to be not only a man, but also a gay man who's Latino, who has to deal with these issues in his life and trying to get over these humps in his life. And I talked about that transition, and it resonated with the reporter so much that she says, oh my God, she's like, I'm going to do you so much justice with this article. And I remember the conversation, and she told me right before she left my apartment that night, she says, if you need to fix your website right now, now's the time to do it, because I know that once we release this article, people are going to flock to your website. And so she told me that they were going to release the article that Friday. And I was like, great. She's like, I'm going to send you a link so you could take a look at the article right before we print it out. We put it out in print. And I was like, great. Friday comes. I don't hear from her. So I'm like, I'm a little worried. I'm like, well, let me just reach out to her and see what's going on. And so I send her a message, and she doesn't get back to me until Saturday. And she's like, I'm so sorry. She's like, I didn't get back to you any sooner, but the editor loved your story so much that he wants to print it in all 3 editions of the Sunday paper.
Wow.
Yeah. And that to me was like, whoa, the Sunday paper, like all 3 editions, this is insane. And it just flew from there. I just started getting calls from Fox News and from like Telemundo and like all these big major network stations contacting me, wanting to interview me. And it was just like, from that point on, it was just like a whirlwind of just emotion and like, what am I going to do with this moment? And all I kept telling myself at that time was, you have an opportunity here. You have a unique opportunity. The world is watching you. What are you going to do? So many times you hear people going viral for so many different reasons, and some of them may seem silly to a lot of people. And I know I've seen stuff that I'm like, wow, this person went viral for that? For
Right.
throwing themselves down a flight of stairs or something, something like crazy like that. And I'm just like, okay. But I said, I don't want to be that person. I want to take this opportunity and I want to do something really good. So that's when I started working with children at the local schools here in New York City. And I started, creating programs and teaching kids how to knit and talking about my story to other kids, especially young boys who are afraid of, or young girls who are afraid of crossing the line into what society says you can and cannot do. And I talk about it. I talk about how it's okay for girls to play basketball and it's okay for boys to knit. And nobody should ever restrict themselves from something that they really want to do or something that they really want to try. So as long as they're not hurting the next person.
Right.
Themselves.
And yeah, totally. And so I guess a few questions. One, did she get the story right?
She did.
Okay.
She did.
That's good because sometimes journalists don't get the story right and it can be hard. I don't know whether some of the subsequent, because there was quite a few subsequent stories. I don't know whether all of them got every aspect of the story right. And it can be hurtful sometimes when they don't get it right. So I don't know if that happened to you, but I'm glad she got it right.
Yeah, she got it right. And the story itself, like I got so much positive feedback and she was right. My website exploded. I started getting all these orders. I couldn't keep up with my orders. It was like, because at that time I was doing just custom work and, like I'd make a couple $100 like during the fall and winter and for custom pieces that I would make. And now I literally like quadrupled sales in one night. Like after that, the article got released, what I make in 1 year, I quadrupled in one day. Right. It was insane. I was just like, wow, how am I going to? So like I had to send out a letter to everybody, who placed an order saying, just bear with me. It's only me. And everybody was on board. They were like, yeah, I'll wait a whole year if I have to. And it was it was a humbling moment for me because for the first time, I felt like I was getting the recognition that I needed, and as an artist, as a male Latino, who I'm like bombarded with all these orders. And I was just like, this is a blessing. And it just made me, I had to regroup my thoughts and I had to figure it out, and it was all a learning process for me. Where I am today, where Brooklyn Boy Knits is today took years and I'm still learning, right? I'm still learning, certain aspects of my business, and I can't say that, my recipe for success is going to be the next person's recipe for success. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we each have to find like what works for us, and I had to go obstacles to get there, and to get to where I am now. And I don't even feel like I've even scratched the surface yet, but I'm coming into myself now, and I'm learning more of who I am and what I like, and more of even the industry itself. This industry, learning the ins and outs of it, and learning what folks like and what folks don't like. And, it's one of those beautiful journeys that I'm going on that I'm enjoying every step of the way.
And how did the 60-second doc come about? There was that's a series of 60-second documentaries, and there's one about you, and I'm wondering how did they reach out to you after this happened?
Yeah. So it's so funny because when I got the email from 60-second doc, I was like, this has to be a joke because I watch 60-second docs all the time.
Me too.
And I love them, and they're like, you get this 1 minute story on a highlight on somebody in the world, and they're doing something wonderful. So I'm like, when I got the email, I was like, no way, this is insane. So like, absolutely, let's do it. And they were like, we saw your story, we've been following your story on social media, and we want to do, we'd love to do a segment on you. And I was like, absolutely. So they hired somebody in Brooklyn to come, the videographer came and we met up, and he says, do you have any ideas as to where you want to be filmed on? I said, definitely on a train, definitely in Coney Island. I live like stops away from Coney Island, so we can go to the Coney Island boardwalk and film there. And I just want people to see where I hang out, where it is what brings me joy, with the streets that I walk down. I don't want to be in some fancy, like, yarn shop. Yeah, I want to walk into a yarn shop, but I want people to see my commute. I want to see my everyday life, and that's what I wanted to focus on. And he did such a wonderful job. And till this day, it is the number one viewed video of mine. That it's right now at like 32 million views. I think
that's incredible, Louis. That's so crazy.
Like when I had to do a search on how many times, because it's a collective, right? So like the video gets shared through so many avenues, and whether it's Facebook, whether it's through the 60-second doc website, Instagram, it gets viewed, and they keep like putting it out there. And so at this point, it's hit 32 million views the last time that I checked, which is about a year ago. And it was just like, it was awesome. And they did it right too. Like I've had no complaints with media as far as taking my story and highlighting it for what it really is, and focusing in on my message, more importantly. And they did a great job with it.
That's great. And
my favorite.
Yeah, speaking of cool opportunities, you are on a Disney Plus show, The Big Fib, which is super cool. So this show is basically two adults say that they're experts, right, on a particular topic, but only one of them really is. And then the kids get to guess which one is the real expert. Is that how this works? How did this happen?
So again, I got an email one day from Disney, and they said, we have, I'm sure you heard of Disney Plus, and I'm like, absolutely. I'm a subscriber to Disney Plus.
Yeah, so am I.
So they're like, we have a new game show that we're about to produce, and we'd love to have you on. And so when they sent me the concept of the game show, I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds like so much fun. And just like you explained it, that's exactly how it is. And Abby, I had an amazing time filming that.
So were you like a yarn expert or like a fake yarn expert?
So it's the knitter episode.
Oh, okay.
I do the warm up round, which is really fun. So if anybody that does have Disney Plus out there, it's episode 11.
Okay.
On the Big Fib. And I come right in the very beginning of that episode. So it's like the first 5 minutes of that episode, a couple minutes. And, it was fun. There's an actor standing next to me, and she's pretending to be the knitter. And so the child, the kid asks us questions, and we have to answer it. And I even do a little demonstration on stage, and it's really fun. And then I get to talk a little bit about myself at the end, and that always helps. And it was fun. It was definitely an experience I'll never forget.
Okay, I'm definitely going to watch it with my kids. That's super cool. Congratulations to you. That is very few people can be like, yeah, I was on a game show on Disney Plus. So that's really cool. I think that's really a neat opportunity, for sure. And then you also, you've done a lot of really cool opportunities. I feel like launched from this whole, I feel like you really made the best of what happened, to you. And I think you've said some people go viral and it's sort of for something kind of dumb or they don't really make the most of it, but you really have. And you gave this really beautiful, which I'll link to in the show notes, TEDx talk. And I wondered, what it was like kind of preparing for that, because to give a really good TEDx talk, you really have to memorize. Am I right in saying you have to memorize your material?
So I had no idea what that experience was going to be like. And when the TEDx people reached out to me, they said they were doing a show in New York, and they were looking for, I had to apply just like anybody else. And they had thousands of applicants, and they had a theme. So every TED show has a theme. And so this theme was unconventional journeys, which really tied well into my story. And so I was, so you basically have to write a little summary of your story and what you want to talk about, submit it. And I sent them video links, and so luckily I got in. And what they do is, the first thing they do is they pair you up with a coach. So TED people do give you a
Oh,
coach.
that's awesome. What a great opportunity. I would love
Oh
to
my
be
God.
paired with a coach. That's awesome.
So, and he was awesome. Like, his name is Bharat, and Bharat Nam, that's his name. I don't want to forget him. And he was excellent. Like, so we met up twice a week. I had 3 months to prepare. Now, the hardest part of this was not it's not so much writing, because I love to write and I feel like I'm a pretty strong writer. But it was me taking I'm a very charismatic person, right? So when I go on stage and I speak to crowds, I just speak from my heart. I never write my speeches down. I never have notes. I just go up there and I just speak from the heart and hope for the best.
Well, you're clearly like really able to talk about passionately about your craft. I mean, that's evident from this conversation. Yeah.
Thank you. And so and they're the TED folks are very, very adamant about making sure that everything is written and there's a flow, there's a process of how you write your speech and all that. And so I knew I was going to struggle with that, because for me, it was like, well, how do I take my feelings onto paper and like really give them that, that I do on a day-to-day basis, but onto paper, and it's got to be structured. And I was just like, so I did struggle with that for a little bit, but then, Bharat, my coach, said, he kept telling me week after week, he's like, Louis, you're trying to give too much structure. He's like, we want to hear you. We want to hear your story. And he's like, just let go. He's like, let go of what the rules are. He's like, don't think of rules right now. Just write from your heart, speak from your heart, and just write it out. And I did that. And I created my story. And when he first read it, he's like, this is what I'm talking about. He's like, this is what you do. So now that I have my, he says, we're going to narrow it down to 9.5 minutes. So I was like, great. So I write out my speech. The hardest part was memorizing that entire speech word for word.
Right. That's what I'm talking about. I know it's memorized, and then having to memorize 9.5 minutes of material word for word. It's like,
Yeah. So you have to memorize it word for word, because they're recording this. So if the TED folks do not like what there could be one line that you say that goes against everything they stand for. That's it. The video's out. So everything has to be, everything has to be approved from the local committee before it heads to the big TED people. So nothing gets approved, like no video, any video that you see on YouTube or on their website was approved by official TEDx people who said, okay, this is worthy enough to be on social media. We can put our name again on this. So it's like I have to get everything approved. And there were like a lot of things that I did have to take out and that I had to tweak a little bit to meet the standards for the TEDx folks, right? So like, for instance, I had way too many anecdotes in the beginning, right? When I was first writing. And they're like, all right, we're going to have to cut the anecdotes down because you got too many anecdotes. So I was like, all right, fine. So I did that. And so like, you submit, every time I was submitting a final copy, it was getting rejected, or they were moving things around a little bit and they were changing words, saying, okay, you have to say it this way, you can't say it this way. I'm like, all right. So there is a structure set up for TED on the TED platform. That was probably also a difficult part to do in terms of writing and rewriting. I was like, all right, how am I going to rearrange my thoughts here? And then, so finally, once it was all finalized and I had my script, as I put it, right, my story, now I have to memorize this thing, and that was hard. So, I'm working a full-time job. I'm still doing the knitting thing on the side, and I'm like focusing on TED Talk, and I was just like, I'm never gonna get this, but luckily enough, I did. I buckled down. I took like 2 weeks off and I focused in on my speech. And come the day of, we had an audience of like a little over 100 people. People bought tickets for the event, and because it was a smaller event, we can only have 100 people in the audience, a little over 100 people, I think it was. And then everything was recorded. So now what a lot of people don't see on these videos is that there's usually 1 or 2 takes before the final copy.
Wow.
So what happens is we let not we, but the people that are spearheading the event let the audience know that we're recording this. And if we forget a line, we have to stop, say, line. And then, so there's somebody sitting in the front row with your script, with your speech.
So you don't start from the beginning, but you start from the line prior.
Correct.
Okay.
So what happens is we had 10 speakers and every speaker stopped twice or 3 times.
Okay.
So it's normal. So now ready for this? This is the fun part, right? So I'm number 9. So mind you, I'm super nervous. It's hours and hours into the event. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm number 9. I'm speaker number 9. I'm like second to last. So I'm like, and as each, speaker's coming off stage after they're done, they're like, oh my God, I'm so relieved it's done and over with. And here I am, like, my nerves are shot. I'm like, I have to get up there in an hour or so and just but so I get up there. Long story short, I get up there. I do my first, I do my speech without missing a line.
Wow.
Wait, it gets worse. I'm on stage and my coach is like, Louis, don't kill us. I'm like, what? He's like, but your speaker didn't go through. I mean, your microphone didn't go through.
Oh my gosh.
So I was like, what do you mean? He's like, no, the audience heard you through.
But it didn't get recorded.
It didn't get recorded. He's like, we have to do it again. So now I'm like, oh my God. So imagine.
As a podcaster, this has happened to me with guests and it's devastating.
Abby, it was the worst moment at that day. So I get up there. I'm like, I do the speech. I'm like, I'm the type of person that runs on adrenaline. So
right. And then it's like it sinks. It's like, oh gosh.
Right. So I get off stage. He's like, we have to do it all over again. And I'm like, no, this is my worst nightmare. And so the thing is, here's the thing, right? So there are moments in my speech that you're supposed to laugh. And, people were laughing
the first time.
The first time. And I go on the second time, I wasn't getting half the laughs. It was just I felt like it was a nightmare. But, after seeing the video, I was like, oh, it came out good.
You would never know. You would never know. Yeah.
Yeah, so in my mind, I was like, this is the worst experience. This is going to be horrible. I'm like, but then finally, months later, when I finally saw the video, I was like, oh, okay, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I was like, all right, this is good.
Wow, I'm glad. I'm just really glad I asked about that because that's an incredible story.
It was a nightmare, but it was
but you know what? I feel like one of the things that is really interesting about all of these experiences, and I'm sure if we kept talking, there was many, many more, is you learn so much about yourself and grow so much from each of them, and take those experiences forward into what you do next. And so that's what's so great about all of them. You know what I mean? So whatever you do as far as appearing on video or speaking at a virtual event or speaking at an in-person event going forward, you take that TEDx talk experience and working with your coach and memorizing and all the rest, writing, and you take it with you, and I'm sure it helps in so many ways.
It really does, and I felt like I grew as an artist, as just being more disciplined with myself, right? Having more structure in my life, going through that TEDx experience and putting myself on a schedule really helped me out, even, business wise. So it definitely was a moment in my life that, it was, I look back at it and there are many moments that I laugh about it. There were moments that I cried, where I felt like I wasn't going to be able to do this. I was like, what did I get myself into? I'm too late in this game to back out. I went through all that. I really did go through all those emotions during that process. And, my advice to folks that may be going through that similar process is I tell them, hang in there, because there is a silver lining in all of that.
Yeah.
And there is an end to all of it. And whether it takes, a day or so or months or years from now, just wait it out.
You got to do hard. You got to do hard things sometimes. Yeah.
It was rewarding, and like I said, just don't give up. That's my advice. Don't give up.
100%. And I want to make sure we talk about some of the cool collaborations you have coming up before we get to your recommendations, because you've got some neat things on the horizon. So you have a collaboration coming up with Madeline Tosh that I'd love to talk about.
That's correct. Yes. So Madeline Tosh, I've been working with them for some time now, and the folks at Madeline Tosh and Jimmy Bean Wool, they are amazing, and they're doing wonderful things for our community. Right now, they're doing the MT Community Fund, where they're featuring Gigi's Gigi Loves Orange colorway that's right now, and so I'm part of their second volume of patterns that they're going to be featuring for the second volume for the MT Community Fund. And then I'll be releasing about 6 to 7 patterns for their new chunky base triple twist. So I have some really cool patterns coming out. One of them is called Lanka, which is a series of 3 accessories. It's 3 accessories. It's a hat, reversible cowl, and fingerless mittens, all done in Fair Isle. And what I love so much about this idea of combining the 3 was that I was able to use 4 skeins of yarn, right? And with all 4 skeins of yarn, you're able to produce all 3 patterns.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Cool. And here's the thing, real quick, and I wanna just highlight this real quick because I think it's important. So many of us, we buy kits online or we go to a yarn shop and we buy these beautiful kits, and 9 times out of 10, we have all this leftover yarn. And I know that I've bought kits in the past and I've done the kits, and I'm left with this yarn that 9 times out of 10 I'm not going to use again. Right. If I do, it's like, oh, great, I can use that yarn that I used for a hat a long time ago. But I was very conscious about when I was designing these 3 accessories and putting it as a kit. I said, I want to make sure that folks get to utilize all of the yarn. And I think that's important. And I wanted to offer knitters that experience where at the end of it, it's like, oh, wow, I used up all the yarn. It's great. There's something rewarding about that. It's just like, oh, great. It's not like you're playing chicken, yarn chicken or like you have all this leftover yarn. So there is a process with my patterns. And the wonderful news is, and I guess I can mention it now, is that I will be doing a knit along in January with those 3 pieces. So I'm going to be teaching folks how to pick out the 4 colors. I'm going to teach them about Fair Isle, about creating no jogs in your work, and just how to incorporate the inner layer of how to cover up your floats in Fair Isle. So I'm going to be going through a lot with folks it's going to be about a month long knit along, where each week I produce a video on YouTube. They watch the video, and then at the end of the week, I do a live Zoom call with everyone on that particular piece. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm really excited about it. So I got about, like I said, 6 to 7 different patterns coming out for the Madeline Tosh triple twist, and I'm really excited about that. And then I have Lady Dye Yarn. She comes out with like a monthly subscription where she has a theme for each month. So she reached out to me, and I've worked with her in the past, and she decided she wanted to do the musical Rent. So I was like, what can I do with Rent? How can I design something with Rent? So if anybody out there is a Rent musical fan, that song Seasons of Love, when they say 525,600 minutes. So I designed a Fair Isle hat with the number 525,600 in the front and the back of the hat. So I'm really happy. Yeah, so it's like a number that you see, and the minute you say it out loud, it's like 525,600. Like, oh, that's from Rent. And I did the test, and I called a couple of friends, and I said, I'm going to say something to you, and I want to see what your thought is. And they're like, okay. So I start saying 525,600, and I stop. And they finish it, minutes, and it's like they started singing the rest of the song. I was like, you got it. And I was so excited because I was afraid that people wouldn't get what I was trying to do with this specific design. So she's like, why did you just say that number? And I was like, because I'm designing a hat with that number on it. And my friend, who's like a big musical fan, she's like, oh my God, you already know I got it the minute you said the number. And she's like, that's brilliant. She's like, yeah, if you were to like, and I made sure I didn't sing it. I just said it. I was like, 525,600. She's like, minutes. Started singing the rest of it. So I'm really excited about that. So that's a collaboration that's coming next month, actually. So we'll be releasing that club kit coming in, I believe, end of November.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure we get to your recommendations, Liz. So do you have something creative that you would recommend to a creative friend who might be listening and would love to try something new?
Yeah, so two things, actually. One of them is tie-dyeing. I actually got into a little bit of tie-dyeing, which is a lot of fun. And I kind of tested out something with ice cubes. So for all you guys,
yes, I did this summer, ice dyeing. Yeah,
much fun. So I recommend it. Try some tie dyeing. It's a lot of fun. But one of the things I discovered. Well, not discovered, but I want to say I got back into this summer was bike riding. Now, as many of you know, we're all in the middle of this pandemic, and I think it's important to find an escape. And what I mean by escape from, and I'm going to be honest with you, escape from just everything that's happening is to find something physical to do. I know I needed to get like my body moving. I needed to get more stimulation with, other than my brain. I needed to get that physical stimulation that I needed. We're all at home. We're all hunkering down, and I get it, right? But I rediscovered bike riding, and I hadn't ridden a bike in so many years, and I invested in a bike this past summer, and I just started riding and found a sense of freedom on my bike that is different than even my sense of freedom from knitting. And I can't explain it. It's just like this escape. I call it my escape, right? And I, again, sometimes we need our knitting to escape from, our everyday lives, right? Whether we're going through an issue, and some of us like to run to our knitting. But I rediscovered bike riding and found that, bike riding helps me in a different way,
Yeah.
and it increases the blood flow. It increases, it's making me move. I'm like, even breaking a little bit of a sweat helped me out. And I was just like, wow, it feels good to be physical, right? So, get on your bikes, pedal away, ride around the neighborhood. Wear your mask, a lot of people, we all have our issues. A lot of people have a lot of issues with the mask and physical activity. Just practice with safe, and make sure if you're riding around an area that there's nobody around, then it's okay to lower your mask, get that fresh breath of air in there. If you're riding around where there's other bikers, be respectful, and I think that's important for all of us to adhere to.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think like during the pandemic, sewing and knitting really took off, and people being at home baking bread, but bike riding, it was hard to even find a bike. People were totally buying bikes. It's so interesting, like which industries really saw a boon. And I think you're not alone, is what I'm saying, in finding bike riding to be a wonderful escape during this time when we've been at home so much. So I think that's a great recommendation. And getting that physical exercise is like such a natural boost to mood too. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And it doesn't even have to be biking. It could be walking around your neighborhood.
Oh yeah, totally.
Skating, whatever, skateboard, scooter, whatever it is. Just get out there, get that fresh air into your lungs. I think it's important. If you have a backyard, maybe run around the backyard a little bit, see what happens.
Totally.
But it's important that we have a little bit of that physical activity as well.
Well, Louis, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Craft Industry Alliance podcast. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much, Abby. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And you've been listening to the Craft Industry Alliance podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Today's episode was sponsored by Jimmy Bean's Wool. Jimmy Bean's Wool believes that creating your next project should be simple, fun, and effortless. Their family of brands, including Texas hand dyer Madeline Tosh, Smart Sticks needles that measure on the go, and the always cute and coveted DelaQ bags, make making look and feel good too. Enjoy super fast shipping, award-winning customer service, and free U.S. shipping for Craft Industry Alliance customers at jimmybeanswool.com/Craft Industry Alliance. Thank you so much, Jimmy Beans Wool. Craft Industry Alliance is a community for craft professionals, and when you become a member of Craft Industry Alliance, you get in-depth coverage of craft industry news, the opportunity to connect with fellow professionals for advice and support, and access to an educational library filled with ideas, tools, and resources to help you as you build your business. Join us at craftindustrｙalliance.org. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.